We have two major topics to discuss today, one with the Eagles and one with the 76ers. We'll begin here. I want Myles Garrett. He's got 60 sacks in the last 4 seasons. I will repeat that in case you misheard me. Myles Garrett has 60 sacks in the last 4 seasons. Him and Jalen Carter together is equivalent to A.J. Brown and Saquon Barkley being on the same offense, if not even somehow maybe a tick above that. And didn't you see what going out and getting a superstar does to a franchise? Number 26 had such a massive impact on who this team was last season. And you are essentially staring at an opportunity where you could bring someone very similar to that, just on the defensive side. And it's at a position that you know Howie Roseman is obsessed with. So it kind of baffles me when I hear the quote, "I don't want Myles Garrett" talk. What do you mean? How is that possible? How do you not want him? Have you seen him? Do you see his contribution? Do you see his elite play? Let me ask you this. If you're an offensive line, what do? Do you stop Jalen Carter? Do you stop Myles Garrett? At least attempt to by throwing bodies their way? I mean, if you have to double, think about what opens up for the rest of the line. You got to pick and choose. And if you pick and choose, one of them is going to be unbearable to deal with. So 215-592-9494. Here's my question for you. Hypothetically, if it took Nolan Smith to get Myles Garrett, would you part ways? Now, it does make me a little uncomfortable. I love Nolan Smith, and I think this kid is going to continue to grow. I think he's got a phenomenal work ethic. And quite frankly, I do expect Howie Roseman to be able to get this done without Nolan Smith. But in a world, as we talk through this, if you did have to put him in the deal, would you? And I thought long and hard about this. If it was the only way, I'd do it. Is Nolan Smith ever getting 16 sacks a season? 14 sacks a season? Over the last 4 years, Myles Garrett, his worst year with sacks was 14. His worst year was 14 over the last 4 seasons. I don't know if Nolan Smith is ever getting there. Now, I think Nolan Smith is going to be good. Is he getting there? I don't think so. So with that logic, I'd have to, if it was the only way to go out and snag someone as spectacular and dominant as Myles Garrett, Nolan Smith would be in the deal for me. What say you? 215-592-9494. We are going to get to your phone calls momentarily. I do want to play for you the audio of Diana Rossini, who was breaking down the current state of Myles Garrett, where the Eagles fall in all this as well. She brings up a little bit of Zach Bond, too. So take a listen. Here's Diana Rossini on her pod, breaking the whole thing down.
You got Josh Sweat, you got Brandon Graham, you got Zach Bond, you got Mekhi Becton, Avonte Maddox. They got a bunch of guys they got to do. And look, with free agency coming up, lots of agents, teams are meeting. They're having conversations about who they're going to be going after. And I really expect Zach Bond to have a great market, right? After having the year he had, there are a lot of teams.
I thought you were going to say for sure sign back.
No, there are a lot of teams in on Zach Bond. So I think he's going to be expensive for Philadelphia if they want to do it. I just think they may get outpriced there. So we'll see how that comes together.
Yeah. I would
gotta-
imagine, like, you tell me if I'm right, like Zach Bond, Mekhi Becton are the two that they got to have back. Like, I don't think they can keep Milton Williams at a salary he's going to get, right?
Yeah, I would be surprised if Milton Williams stayed. It could happen, but that does make a lot of sense. I think they're going to make an effort here, but here's what some people are saying right now, that Howie's willing to move on from some of these guys because he's looking to make a big swing and take a big swing. And that big swing would be for Myles Garrett.
I tried telling you all a few days ago that the whole spiel he gave everybody, Howie that is, at the Combine was a bunch of BS because he doesn't sleep and he's always willing to improve this team and he's always trying to get superstar talent. So here we are a day or two later and it's already about the big swing that Howie Roseman is looking to do. I understand that Zach Bond is fun to talk about what he did this season based off of the expectations. But some of these guys, it was kind of written in stone that they were going to go. There was no world where Josh Sweat was coming back. I don't think there was a world where Milton Williams was coming back, considering he wore a Clutch sports hoodie the day of locker cleanout, which is the biggest statement in the world to the Eagles front office that, yeah, you got to talk to my people. Yeah, you got to talk to my agent, who, by the way, is going to chase a bag for me. So they were kind of already out, in my personal opinion, and we'll see what other decisions are made with right guard and also with the linebacker. But, I kind of want to look at this through the lens of Nolan Smith. And if it did take someone that intriguing, if it took someone that young, if it took someone with such a bright future like Nolan Smith to acquire Myles Garrett, would you be willing to put him in the trade package? And I prefer not to. But as we sit here and have some barroom conversation throughout the evening, I never see Nolan Smith's ceiling as high as Myles Garrett's. I don't see him being like, he may get double-digit sacks. It wouldn't surprise me if Nolan Smith gets 10 sacks, maybe 9.5 sacks. He's going to be a damn good, nice, fresh, young defensive end. And that's awesome. But I'm trying to maximize this run here. And in the NFL, things change rather quickly. Before you know it, things go in crazy directions. So what I'm trying to do is maximize a healthy Saquon Barkley. Maximize a healthy offensive line. Hey, how about a line that still has Lane Johnson? Because I don't know how many years he has left. I'm trying to maximize where this current team is, because before you know it, things can fall apart. So now's the time to go after the big dog. 215-592-9494. Let's go to the phones. Let's start things off with John. You're on WIP. Yo, John.
Hey, Hunter, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you, John?
I'm doing well. It's so funny. Like, I'm all about going all in on the deal. And a friend brought up to me today, he's like, would you deal Nolan Smith? And I'm like, I believe we can get the deal without him.
Mm-hmm.
But, I agree. Myles Garrett is one of those players that in this defense and this culture, God knows what we have. So I'm like, if it's, I would do the deal, but everybody without Nolan Smith. So, and then that's where I stand on that point. But at the same time, it's like, I believe we have the ability to sign Zach Bond and Myles Garrett. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but at the same time, I'm like, Myles Garrett's one of the best defensive ends in the last 5 years. So how could you pass up on that? And then if you look at revisionist history, look at what they got out of Saquon Barkley. So if you want to repeat, if you think your window is 3 years before all these guys are up for contracts, and I'm talking about Jalen Carter, the receivers might be up for contracts. Jalen's going to be like, yeah, I need a new deal. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Now, listen, I think it's all interesting, John, and I'll chew on that. Thank you so much for the call. You're right about how great Myles Garrett is. What we can't do is pretend he's just a guy. What we can't do is act as if he doesn't make a significant impact. And in the world you brought up where you can bring Bond back and sign Myles Garrett and trade for him, I can never rule out Howie Roseman manipulating the money, manipulating all the cap space. So I don't think that that's ludicrous. There is a world where it can happen because Howie Roseman always makes it happen. And one thing I want to also bring up is the draft capital. Because I constantly hear that, well, what we can't do is give up first-round picks because that technically will then be losing a future Jalen Carter or a future Quinyon Mitchell or a future whoever you drafted high in the first round or in the first round in general, Nolan Smith, who was a later first-round pick. But here's my rebuttal to that. Howie Roseman, he knows how to reacquire draft capital. See, what's not going to happen is Howie just flushes these draft picks down the toilet, acquires Myles Garrett, and then Howie sits on his hands and go, well, we're good now. Come on. This is the greatest general manager in the NFL. You know what he does then? He does the second layer to this. He goes out and starts moving draft pick. He trades back at the draft, gains picks for future years, this and that. You know, he maneuvers it all the way through. And by the way, saying flushing the picks down the toilet is a smack in the face when you consider you're getting someone who had 60 sacks in the last 4 seasons as a one-man show here. One-man show! By himself. 60 by himself. And he'll be playing next to Jalen Carter. I'm not telling you it's an easy decision for me. When it was brought up, Brodes, Nolan Smith in the deal, yes or no? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Where do you stand? I will admit, my first reaction was, ooh, I don't know about that. Let me sit on it. It wasn't an instant yes. It wasn't an automatic. It was, ooh, all right. I know you have to give a little to get a little. You can't just fleece everyone, hand them crap, and then you just get a glorious bouquet. It doesn't work that way, right? So when I let it settle, I realized I'm trying to go get another. And if I think of the max Nolan Smith can be, and the max Myles Garrett can be, I don't think it's close. And that's no knock on Nolan Smith. That's just the greatness of Myles Garrett. And I also love the fact that he's going to bring in a hunger that could be refreshing and can help rejuvenate a locker room that just won the whole thing. Because the reason he wants out is what? He wants a damn Lombardi. He wants a trophy. He wants a championship. Well, you bring that attitude into this locker room, which I'm not doubting Jalen, AJ, and some of these other guys who are ready to go after this puppy again. I think they have the right mindset anyway. But it would be nice to have a superstar and a dominant force and a future Hall of Famer coming into town with that same intensity that this team had last season for a championship, if that makes sense. Let's go to Albert in Langhorne. What's up, Albert?
Brodes, so glad to talk to you, buddy.
Thank you. What's going on?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, when I hear that you come on the radio, it's always great to sit and listen to you. Your opinions are spot on, and you're a good guy, and I really appreciate your knowledge.
No, thank you so much, man. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
Okay, what I wanted to say is, what do you think? What can the Eagles do if we want to hang on to Bond, but we also want to get Garrett? Can we still do that?
I don't think it's impossible. I'm not going to act as if right now I can put all the puzzle pieces together because that's something Howie Roseman mastered. If I could figure that out right now on the top of my head, I'd be in Howie's shoes, which would be awesome. Yep. But look, I don't think it's impossible with Howie Roseman to crunch the numbers and figure something out.
Brodes, I want to tell you one thing. What you just said about Nolan Smith, I love the guy. He's coming on and whatever. But if we can get a Myles Garrett, who could probably get us maybe 15 sacks 2 seasons in a row, that's going to beat out anything Nolan Smith is going to do. And we have a tremendous chance then of repeating next year. This is what I believe anyhow.
I can't disagree with you at all, Albert, and thank you so much for the kind words and the opinion. And more on that. We're acting as if the youth thing of it, right? Because Myles Garrett's getting older. He's not that old, but he's getting older. You'd be giving up youth in theory. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Devontae Smith. There's still plenty of youth on this team. This offensive line, the right tackle is going to be different, I'm sure, over the next couple of years. After, I'm saying, in a few years, it seems like Lane Johnson may eventually hang up those cleats. And that's why, with him here still, I would like to try and put the best talent possible around, because you want to maximize the last stretch run of Lane Johnson as arguably the best right tackle in the NFL. It's not arguably, it's the damn truth. But there's a ton of young talent. And these Milton Williams of the world, these Josh Sweats of the world, who are definitely contributors. Where were they drafted? 3rd round, 4th round. You can replenish the defensive line in other ways with mid-level draft picks. That's what Josh Sweat was. That's what Milton Williams was. We have a version, to a degree, in Jalix Hunt. You have a Jomo. I'm not telling you snap your fingers and both of these guys are automatically getting that level of production that we saw from them last year to go win a Super Bowl. But I'm saying over time, Milton Williams developed into what he was this last year. And if you're constantly picking these defensive linemen, as Howie Roseman always does, you can still have this rotating door of these type of defensive tackles and defensive edge rushers that can help replace these guys that you are losing while you add a Garrett, and you will see these players develop, step up, and become a nice, strong piece to the pie. So it's not as if you can never get any contributions from these men that Howie Roseman can select in the 3rd round, in the 4th round, in the 2nd round. If you do have to give up some 1st-round draft capital for Myles Garrett. And don't forget, then again, Howie will continue to play the game where he's constantly calling guys and he's moving back and he's gaining assets and he's getting different year draft picks and he's adding to that pile, and it's one big rotation. Essentially, to summarize and make it a little easier for you to follow, if Howie Roseman was to pull this off, do you really think Howie Roseman doesn't know what to do after that to keep this thing in motion? To keep his foot on the gas? Please. Trust me. This would be step 1 of a 5-step process. Sign me up. Let's go to Lewis in Philly. What's going on, Lewis?
Hey, you definitely just beat me to the punch, or what I was just thinking. We have a window that's open right now with a lot of talent all over the field, and sometimes you got to take some cuts as far as players and so forth. Good to have Bond back, but the reality is, if we make a move like the move that we're speaking about with Garrett, which I think is an excellent move, I'm all for it. I say go get him. Why? Because you pair him with Jalen Carter. You have a really strong front 4. You put what's the other guy's name? The one that you just said?
Jordan Davis?
No, the one with the Ojaba.
Ojomo.
Ojomo. You rotate Hunt and stuff like that. They could learn as well tricks of the trade, crafts from a master at basically sacking people. Also, that's going to give him a boost of energy as far as a boost of motivation and a new team, and also it helps out the linebacker core, which also I'm not too worried about the back end with the safeties and the cornerbacks. We know what we got with them. Now we got Jeremiah Trotter Jr. We also have Dean at the linebacker core. I'm sure they're probably going to draft another linebacker. So I'm all for it because it's just going to help the defense just become a lot more stronger up front. And I don't understand the infatuation with us trying to keep young players. I understand we need young players. We need the influx of young draft picks and so forth. But when you have a roster that's already at the winning stage and we just won a Super Bowl, you want to keep it open as much as possible. We're not going to have these guys all constantly be able to re-sign everybody. We can't do that. It's impossible. It's just like right now, Fred Johnson would go in for, Becton and stuff like that, and Steen, to replace people and stuff like that. So we have to trust in the development of other players, and we also have to trust the draft. And Howie's been pretty good at the draft the last good 10+ years. Like, we have an influx of young talent. We have to take advantage of that, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, listen, I'm all for the Garrett, and thank you, Lewis. I appreciate it. I wouldn't say a full 10 years. There was a couple-year stretch where things got a little ugly, but there's no doubt about it how he has cleaned it up over the last handful for sure and knocked a lot of these picks out of this world. So if he continues this hot stretch that he's on, it can help out big time if you were to part ways with a Nolan Smith. If you are to part ways with some first-round drafting, you can still find a Cooper DeJean in the second round. You can still get a Landon Dickerson in the second round. These are monster picks, and you can definitely see them still finding phenomenal players to step in and be a big force. The one thing I will disagree with when it comes to what Lewis said is the linebacker stuff. Nakobe Dean's injury makes me a little worried just because, it was a tough injury for sure. And I don't know if Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is ready for a full-time go. Now, if you improve your defensive line, then yes, of course, the secondary in the middle of the field doesn't have to be as strong, because if you get home quicker and you're such a juggernaut up front, then of course there's just not enough time for the quarterback to process and go through his progressions. So you can take hits at the linebacker position to a degree. So you might not have all pro Zach Bond, but I don't know if you can go rely on a Jeremiah Trotter Jr. either to be plugged into that position and say, hey, let's go win a Super Bowl. You have to find that next Zach Bond where it's might not be all pro, but you gotta get better than that too. You know what I mean? You gotta find that middle ground somehow out there. 215-592-9494. That is the phone number to participate. We have to discuss what you'd be willing to part ways with for Myles Garrett, or do you not want to attack that at all? 215-592-9494. Before we get right back to the phones, because we are going to run your phone calls this segment, I did want to share with you my favorite moment of the Super Bowl season, and this is jumping off of the afternoon show who did this a couple of days ago, and it's got to be the Saquon Barkley playoff run in the snow. It just has to be. The guy was going so insane emotionally that he just started punching himself in the head. At home, in a divisional round, in the snow, in the playoffs for the Birds after leaving the Giants. He breaks one free and starts smacking himself in the head repeatedly. And that was just his organic, natural reaction because he was cracking out. Isn't that what the kids say these days? Oh, crashing out, excuse me. Should probably watch what I say here. He was crashing out. I don't know how that's not it. Outside of, actually winning the Super Bowl, I guess you could go with the simple answer of the Devontae Smith touchdown was pretty gnarly. I think that's when it was registering in my brain, Brodes, they got the second Lombardi. So that was fun, too. It's a couple of different answers, but that's the one that came to my mind. All right, let's go to Sue in Winfield. What's up, Sue?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. What's going on, man?
Nothing much. Myles Garrett is
Obviously, he's an amazing player. I would love to have him on this team. But in terms of giving away Nolan Smith to get him, that's very, very difficult for me to be fine with, honestly, because I would send him if it were Jordan Davis this year's first-round pick and a second-round pick next year. Please be my guest. I would absolutely do that, pull that trigger. But for Nolan Smith, considering his ramp-up of production this year,
yeah,
I can't.
Listen, that's fair. Sue, I don't think that's crazy. My initial reaction was, ooh, wow, that's not one I would like to part ways with. And once again, it's just barroom conversation stuff. So I guess my question back to you would be, do you ever see Nolan Smith being as good as Myles Garrett, or does that not matter to you in this equation?
Honestly, I would say it doesn't necessarily matter to me in this equation because how many more years with Myles Garrett turning 29 this year, how many more years do we really expect Myles Garrett to perform at the level he's performing?
What if I said 3?
3? Then yeah, absolutely. I would pull that trigger.
Okay. What if I said 2?
No.
Okay, so that extra year. Okay.
Because I believe the previous caller said that in essence you have to win the Super Bowl in those 2 to 3 years that you believe you're getting Myles Garrett still in his prime.
But isn't that the expectation?
It is, but you never, in this league, you just never know. I mean, also there's other people too that are potentially on the trade block where you got Harold Landry from Tennessee. I wouldn't mind the Eagles taking a look at him. Maybe Max Crosby. I think you get Max Crosby at a lesser price than Myles Garrett.
Good point. Good point.
So, and on top of that, you got Khalil Mack, who's a free agent. Now, I understand we probably would be overpaying for him, but I still think having his veteran presence, and it's not like he lacks a production, you know what I mean? I think he'll give us just as much as Josh Sweat gave us or maybe more. So I feel like there's other options out there. And on top of that, we all want Zach Bourne to be back in Philly. That is the number one thing. I think that every Philadelphian be able to sleep good at night this all season knowing that Zach Bourne is coming back. So considering Zach Bourne back in Philly and you bring in someone like a Harold Landry who's a double sack guy the past few seasons, or Max Crosby will be lesser of a price than Myles Garrett, I think that works out a lot better for us long term than bringing Myles Garrett here and giving up Nolan Smith.
I'm not against that. Sue, that's an interesting perspective. Thank you. I've been so in on Myles Garrett, and I do think you can do Garrett and Bourne. I do. I feel that way. I do. But just speaking out loud with you all, keep Bourne for sure. Go get Max Crosby. Paying less. Not getting as much. I don't think Max Crosby is Myles Garrett, but you can still continue to plug in holes that you would lose if you fully went after Myles Garrett and Myles Garrett only. I'm open to it. My biggest problem with Sue's call, and I'm using it as a jumping off point, I've heard a lot of calls throughout the day have a very similar message about the pressure and how much pressure this adds. I heard Ike say it, and I love Ike. I agree with Ike a lot of the time, but on this particular one, I didn't. The pressure thing. If you trade for Myles Garrett, then there's pressure to win a Super Bowl. Yeah, I know. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I want to do. I'm not here to say, all right, let's have a 7-year window where we're going to be competitive, and I don't know what. No. I don't want to just be competitive. I want to win the Super Bowl. That's what I'm trying to do. And things change rather quickly. So it's time to pounce. And there's a way where you can still find a good mix of going for it now and having a window. Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, that's part of your window. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, that's part of your window. Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, that's part of your window. Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Mailata. These are all parts of your long-term window. Mailata's got 7-8 years ahead of him. Cam Jurgens is just getting a taste of this. You got plenty of window already built into the fabric of this Eagles team, and you can get a Myles Garrett. So you can do both. But what I can't do, I can't accept that it puts too much pressure on them to have to win now. I want them to win now. You're telling me if they don't get Myles Garrett, the goal isn't to win now? The goal is to win now with or without Myles Garrett. So if the goal is to win now, and you can get the more special talent, then go get the more special talent. Know what I'm saying? That's how I interpret it, at least.